everyone, so welcome to a new episode of House of EDH, and I'm Smith. You can find me on Twitter, Smith. Thank you. Okay, so I think I just want to share a little bit about this deck. This is currently my favorite deck. I think it's really fun, and while it has a lot of high power-ish card that generally people will think that, oh, this is CDH card and things like that, but that being said, I feel like the synergy of this deck, it's really more towards the fun part, considering the fact that you know, our commander itself, it's not exactly the most competitive. That's one. The ability itself gives treasures to everyone, and then at the very same time, this commander itself is actually in Gruul, which is generally there's not much of a like an Esper, right? Like the white, the whole black as well as blue. So the all the really powerful combo pieces not being able to be in this deck. So this is one of the reasons that I really like this deck. It's like a casual deck, but at the very same time, it can get really interesting if the cards are being slaughtered or like your luck is on your side. Alright, so this deck is actually the deck that I've played on Esmond's channel, right? The QMTG, right? So if you guys have watched that episode and found your way here, you can actually see how the deck works in this highish power table and pot. And at the very same time, if you have not watched the episode, I'll drop the link on this under this video, and you can actually check it out and see how this deck really works. And at the very same time, there'll be this Moxfield link that if you're interested to take a look at all the other cards. Okay, so I'll just enough of introduction and setting it up. So I think you guys have been looking at this screen long enough that you should know that Jolene, the Plunder Queen, right? Whenever a player attacks one or more of your opponents, that attacking player creates a treasure token. So if you would create one or more treasure tokens, instead create these tokens plus an additional treasure token and sacrifice 5 treasures, put 5 +1/+1 counter on Jolene. So this deck for me, obviously there will be a lot of treasure synergy, and at the very same time there is this hidden synergy of dragons. So while I was building this deck, I was like, oh man, what else can I do with all these treasures and pay out, right? So obviously I went ahead and go on with some of these sexiest red and green cards with the high CMC, which is obviously the dragons, right? So I'm gonna go on and share with you guys some of this card and how some of this card works together. So this deck, for me, I name it Jolene, the Mother of Dragons. So in order to, right, you know, it's very thematic. I actually have this House Targaryen sleeve from Dragon Shield. Yep, so no prize for guessing that right. I'm a huge GOT fan as well. Right, so I think this is one of my favorite cards from last year from New Capenna, Professional Facebreaker. So it creates more treasure for me when I combat. So effectively, if I have a creature to attack one of my opponent, I actually get to create a treasure of Professional Facebreaker. And because of Jolene's ability, I get to add an additional 1 treasure, and then triggering Jolene's her own ability, that gives me another treasure, and with that it gives me an additional treasure. So if it's a one of this creature attacking one of my opponent, right, and then together with Jolene, I can actually create up to 4 treasures just like that. So this, you can imagine how quickly this deck will ramp me up with all these treasures. And of course, one of the very popular treasure synergy card that there's no good reason for me to leave it out, right? Zon. And of course, Academy Manufacturer, you will create the clue and food token as well. There isn't very high synergy for these 2 other tokens, but later on you will see that it's actually one of the payout that what it can actually do. Of course, favor Mirror of the Mirror Breaker. I think everyone is very should be very familiar with this card. It creates more treasure for me, and then at the end of it, it helps me to it has the ability to help me create copies of some of the creatures that is already on the battlefield. And of course, what is treasure synergy without Ragavan, right? And of course, the Dockside Extortionist. I'm not the biggest fan of this art, to be fair, but I just thought it's quite funny to see both of them actually side by side. They look like brothers somehow, right? Okay, so this blue goblin. So of course, one of the strongest red card in the format. Like, there's no good reason why we should actually leave it out. So this card itself, I mean, I just want to talk a little bit about it as well, right? I mean, over the years of playing EDH, you will notice that a lot of people talking about how we need to ban this card, how this card is being overpowered. But I think one of the thing about Dockside Extortionist itself is that it scales itself to the power of everyone else on the table. So there are times that when I play with a lower power pot, where there is really not much of the mana rocks or such artifact on the battlefield of my opponent, and when it comes into play in the early game, there's really not much of a treasure to be created per se, right? Of course, Sticky Finger, one of my favorite enchantment. For 1 mana, you actually can enchant this creature to get it manas, and at the same time, it creates a treasure token when combat damage as well. And of course, when the creature dies, you get to draw a card. To be fair, the last ability, most of the time, people just forget it. Like, yeah. Of course, the River Cleaver, one of the best red artifact equipment, was printed last year as well. So basically, your creature became some sort of like an Honor Bone, right? So it creates that many treasure token. Of course, Rain of Reaches. So I think this deck itself, like I was saying, while there are a lot of powerful cards, even like the likes of Dockside Extortionist, Ragavan, why do I still not call it like an CEDH, right? Or I just call it like a high power? It's because of such cards, right? There are a lot of such cards that are relatively high CMC, and at the very same time, there are a lot of luck element in this deck itself. So like, for example, for this card itself, it's one of my favorite because it's really, really fun, right? So it actually gives you treasure, and at the very same time, you cascade. So if in a situation where Rain of the Reaches is already I mean, when you cast Rain of the Reaches and when Jolene is already in play, instead of getting 2 treasures, you get 3 treasures, right? So I think that's really, really fun, especially when it comes to the cascading part. And if you cast one of the huge dragon for multiple mana using the treasure token, you actually really get really, really good value out of it. And yes, I was talking about the payout when we talk about the Academy Manufacturer. So Reckless Fireweaver is one of those cards that it's the payout when all these little artifact tokens comes into play, and it will actually create enough to burn your opponents, right? So I wouldn't give away too much of the game that I've played with Esmond and the team, but watch out, this is, yeah, it's a spoiler if you haven't watched it, right? Of course, I think this is one of my favorite dragon in the whole deck, for a few reasons. One is edge foil. I'm a sucker for edge foil cards, and the other part of it is that it's a dragon, it creates treasure token, and it's actually one of the main I would say one of the main piece of the combo, one of the really few combos in this deck that actually help us. So there are 2 ways to win in this deck, right? One is through like Fireweaver, when you create a lot of such tokens and burn your opponents to death, and the other it's obviously because they are all huge dragons, they fly in the air and destroy your opponents just like every other dragon deck. But with this, so of course, I think I can't remember where I'm gonna, like, you're probably gonna see the main card later on, the so-called the hidden, I would call that card the hidden commander, but this is actually like pretty much the heart of the deck in some ways. So basically, when this ETB, you create a treasure token, and any other dragon that comes into play, ETBs also create another treasure token. So there's this little combo that I'm talking about is with Lattice, the Dragon Queen. So whenever another non-token dragon enters the battlefield, actually create another red 5/5 red dragon creature with flying as well. So with this card, these 2 cards, and of course with I always can't pronounce this card, right? It's Scorn of Velkas, right? So with this, the dragon keeps coming into play. When you have more dragon comes into play, whoa, look at the ring light. Phew. Okay, anyways, so when there's a additional dragon that comes into play, it creates a treasure token. It will trigger Lattice at the same time and create another dragon, and that dragon itself will trigger Ganex again to create another treasure token, and at the same time, all this dragon that comes into play will deal damage to my opponents. So there are ways, I mean, if you are watching this video, you probably it's somebody who is knee deep into Magic the Gathering, especially the EDH format. So I'm pretty much, you can guess where this deck is going in terms of what are the other key cards that helps to create dragons, multiple dragons, and multiple treasure. So I'll just put these 3 cards aside. And of course, I do play some of these more cheap little dragons as well for 3 mana, patron of the arts, and as well as a swashbuckler extraordinaire. Well, with a mouthful, man, right? So this they're very similar. The ETB, they create a treasure token on their own, and then whenever I attack this guy, I can sacrifice treasure for another ability that the dragon actually get double strike, right? So imagine the scenario when if Jolene is in play, one of these dragon comes into play, ETB, instead of 1 treasure token, I get 2 treasure tokens, and with Ganex in play, it will allow me to create another treasure token, and because it's a different trigger, Jolene will create another dragon for it, so which means another treasure for it, which means I will get actually 4 treasure token, and with Lattice in play, it allows me to create another dragon token and trigger Ganex itself, so I can get up to like 6 treasure tokens, right? If I know what I'm talking about, right? So that's really a lot of treasure. So this is effectively how this deck is going. And of course, Rapacious Dragon, right? This itself creates 2 treasure tokens with all the other triggers. It's really fun. So there are some of these dragons that in the deck, not just because they are strong, but they're also in here because they are pretty, and I just have some affinity to them. I really like some of these cards, so which is why I really like this deck. It's fun, and at the same time it plays out one of the most interesting or rather most iconic tribal in Magic the Gathering, which is the dragons, right? So for Shivan Devastator, it's a very recent card from DMU, right? Flying Haste. So if things goes wrong on my end in terms of not being able to get the combo pieces and stuff, and if I have this, and I have situations where I actually have like 40-50 treasure tokens on the playing field, right, on the battlefield, this is exactly what it can do. Potentially one of the payout comes into play, Flying Haste, I sacrifice all these treasures, and it just boom, whack the face of the opponent as well. And of course, Blast Furnace Hellkite, one of the really recent card from the Brothers War. It's 9 mana, artifact offering, flying, double strike. Most of the time for this card, I don't really I don't have really very high CMC, an artifact of sort that can allows it to minus a lot of its lower its the casting cost by much. Usually it's really just sacrificing 1 treasure of sort, and I will sacrifice another 9 treasure to cast it as an as a flash, right? Because of the artifact offering, it allows it to be cast in a flash timing, like an instant. So it's really being drop into play, especially when my opponents are attacking each other because of Jolene's ability when they want to get some treasures, and I just pump it down, throw it down to the battlefield, and creates this whole double strike, and it can potentially kills off one of these opponent unexpectedly, right? And of course, Hellkite Charger, it helps me to potentially have unlimited combat phase, which is actually, this card is on the way out. It's one of those cards that I want to replace, but the card that I have in mind, it's yet to come in. So as of now, this is still here. Right, Dragonborn Champion, I think it has gotten a lot of attention since like the CLB set, where there are a lot of dragons being published, being printed, right? So all these dragons, and this price just skyrocketed because of that, and most of this the fundamental of playing EDH, right? Card draw and as well as RAM. So this guy is actually a very good source of card draw, especially with all these huge dragons in play that allows me to draw for answer. And of course, Atakar World Render, right? So very similar, in a very similar way. The only reason why it's here, it's because of the double strike. So in terms of with the whole treasure, the whole treasure synergy is not going to work. I still have some stuff to, you know, swing and deal damage in the air. Atsushi. This dragon, it's really one of my favorite because of how the design looks, the very oriental look of it. It's like a red dragon from Dragon Ball, but it's red, right? So it's really cool, and because it's from the Kamigawa Neon set, I purposely bought a Japanese copy instead for flavor. I really really think the flavor here is really strong. I love it. I mean, it dies and gives you 3 treasures. Yeah, treasures, synergy and stuff, but it's really not one of those cards that determine the game at all. It is really here because it's pretty, right? And of course, our Vara Hellkite, I guess, right? Okay, so it's flying, it's 6/6, slam face, create more dragon. What can I complain? And why can't it be here, right? It has to be here. We are talking about dragon, and it's Gru. If it's not here, I don't think what I'm gonna say about this. Of course, Ghostman Dragon, yet another dragon that creates treasure. It's flying in the air. It's cool. It's great. It has haste. I love it. And then Wafu Red Dragon. It's really one of the reasons why this is in the deck. Besides the fact that it's pretty, it's also because it's more to defense against the like of Blasphemous Act, right? Or even sometimes I will be the one doing the Blasphemous Act and come down and burn him and every other dragon, and it's just destroy all my opponent just that one blow, right? And of course, right. What else can I say? It's treasure, it's dragon, and this is like the best dragon that creates the most number of treasure stand alone. So this is cool. And of course, this is the only mono green dragon in the deck, Onorbone, right? So sometimes it comes in and the rest of the dragon slams in the air, and I create plenty of treasures as well. And Terror of the Pig, I guess I don't need to really explain myself, so it works pretty much like Volcas, okay? And of course, Balefire Dragon works some sort like a bot wipe for me as well. And of course, we are talking about paying homage to a dragon deck. How can a deck call itself a dragon deck without the OG Shivan Dragon? When I started playing Magic the Gathering, it was like around 5th or 6th ad, and at that point of time, Shivan Dragon is still a relatively strong dragon for me, and I really love it, right? So I think when I returned to Magic the Gathering like a year plus or 2 ago, it has always been on my mind to really form a deck that includes it, right? If you notice, the logo of my channel, it's really inspired by Shivan Dragon's color palette as well. So yeah, I just have to put it in, right? I just have to put it in. And of course, after introducing the dragons, the treasure creators, I think there are some of these creatures and cards that pretty much like the payout for, I mean, like we are already giving people, I mean, the other opponents treasure, and what else can we do with it? Like for Sadia Avenger is a pretty new card, right, from the Brothers War as well. I think it's one of those things that punishes my opponent for using the treasures that I've gave them, right? And at the very same time, if they don't, sure, you can keep it and be greedy about it, and then just watch out for this very simple and harmless looking 2-mana 1/1 Goblin Warrior that has First Strike and Trample coming your way, larger than you can imagine, right? And of course, yes, this is the secret commander that I was talking about, Magda herself. So with this huge amount of treasures, what are we going to do with it? Hey, guess what? We can just fish all this dragon out, right? It's so great. Like once the moment I have like 10 or 15 treasures, I can start pulling out some of these dragons that continuously create treasures for me. And most of the time, especially with some of the cards later on that I'll show you, you will see that I just continuously create almost close to unlimited number of treasures, and I just can pull out the whole deck of dragons just like that. And this itself, it's a very cool and flashy fun combo that it can be very flimsy if you have the interaction in your deck. So it's not like something like, oh, I go infinite and I win the game for sure, right? So it's more of like, hey, I'm gonna try to go off, but however, if you do not have an answer for me, too bad, that's on you. And the game will end at that point of time, right? But I love it. I love how Magda itself has put this deck on another level. But however, there's no good way for me to say, hey, let me just create Magda itself to play similar and in the mono red function. It's very tough for me to, because we have to balance the number of treasure creators, like even the dwarves themselves. And most of the time, ever since the CDH version of Magda blew up, every single time. I do have a Magda mono red deck as well. Every time when I cast Magda onto the battlefield, it's a kill on sight. But whereas if I'm hiding this within this deck, the chance of it surviving is way higher, right? And of course, Tamor Sabertooth, I don't think I need to explain why this card is in this deck. I have Dockside, and I bounce the cards and stuff, so the value of it is tremendous. And at the very same time, there are other dragons that I can bounce them around, and I can really gather value over time as well. So this card works really, really well in this deck. Yeah. Alright. And then of course we have Over the Top. Okay, so this card, it's like, I mean, this card itself, it's crazy. It's just one of those things that I go bam, right? It's over the top. I think most of you guys who have a crack, even a lot of the CLB cards might not even remember this. I mean, Brothers War pack might not even remember this card at all. It's over the top. So I'll read it out. Each player review a number of cards from the top of their library equals to the number of non-land permanent they control. Put all permanent cards they review this way onto the battlefield, and put the rest into their graveyard. So with, let's say, 20-30 of those treasure tokens that I have in play, I'm going to cast it Over the Top. And most of this deck itself, later on you'll see, it's mostly permanent. So I'll just drop everything onto the battlefield. They get haze, they burn you up and stuff like that. It's fun. I've not won the game with this card before, but I can imagine how it works when it happens. It's gonna be great. So every time when I'm looking for a card to cut out from this deck, Over the Top is one of those cards that I say, hey, I'm not gonna touch it. I'm just gonna leave it there. I need to win a game with Over the Top, right? And of course, Parallel Lives, Doubling Season, I think there's no surprise why these two cards are in this deck when it comes to treasure creation, doubling. So with the Ganax and Lattice combo, this guy, the moment it's in here and together with Magda, it's basically pretty much unlimited. You just go infinite, right? Because Lattice, it creates one additional Lattice as well, and then with additional Lattice coming in, triggering Ganax, and together with the Parallel Lives, you get more and more treasure. You effectively, just like I mentioned earlier on, you can fish out the whole deck. And of course, Dragon Tempest itself is very similar ability that we just deal damage, and of course gives haste. So especially with Over the Top, I think this is beautiful. And of course, there's no surprise why Cracker with Power is here with the number of treasures. This is one of those payout. So this whole stack of cards that you're gonna see from this whole segment, right? So most of them are payout of the treasures. And of course, Jessica's Will, one of the red EDH staple, has to be here. And of course, oh, look at this. I'm so happy that the DMR set actually reprinted Bird of Paradise in this format of retro foil. So I think the Mark's artwork is amazing. It's one of the most iconic artwork ever. And at the same time, look at this shooting star. Yeah, paid the premium for this, but no regrets. I love it. Yes, and of course, Elvish Spirit Guide, as well as Simian Spirit Guide, just to ramp the game up. And yeah, this is the part where most people will start to see these cards and like, dude, your deck is really high power, it's really crazy and stuff. But to be honest, I would say Mana Rock is just Mana Rocks. Yes, it elevates the deck to become faster, and most of the time it allows me to do a lot more things. But the whole idea of it's still casual, right? I mean, no EDH deck is going to play Over the Top. So of course we have Jeweled Lotus, we have Mana Creep, we have Lotus Petal, we have Mana Vault. Of course, all this rocks is really just for me to be able to cast Jolene earlier in the game. That's usually the whole idea of this, right? Because the moment when my treasures engines start coming in, these cards are basically just there on the battlefield. And of course, we have Soul Ring. I love this one. Ding. And Arcane Signet. And of course, the Talisman of Impulse. And this guy is there to, give haste, card draw, and ram at the same time. Yep, one of the DMR cards that I love. Sylvan Library. Okay, So I have this whole relationship with this card that I kind of like it because it gives me card draw. It's probably the best card draw, green card draw engine in some ways, but most of the time the way I play, I killed myself so many times with this card, right? Just because like, oh, I want an answer, I want a piece, I will just keep drawing, I'll keep two, because basically to me, like, keeping a card is as good as if skipping a draw step, which is like, I mean, take one draw step ahead of time. It's like I'm taking 2 turns within one and 3 turns all in total, right? 8 life for 3 turns. You know how the saying goes, right? You know, life is a resource, use it. So for me, it's like, I just want those cards. And yes, I've killed myself many times with this card. And of course, Garou Uprising, card draw. Guardian Project, card draw. Beast Whisperer, card draw. So this card draw itself, especially like I was saying, right, together with Sabertooth, Tamor Sabertooth, I'm allowed to bounce the creatures to allow me to find for things that I want. For example, Magda, if I can't find it. Okay, then Toski, it's card draw, obviously. And this is a flexible card draw, as well as the land MDFC. And this part, you will see some of the interaction. Yes, Deflecting Sword, Wheels Reversal. I think Wheels Reversal itself, I'm not sure about most decks. I've not seen the stats, but to me, it's like one of my favorite new red counter spell. I think it's very fun. You get to roll dice, and for 3 mana, yes, it's a bit high on high side for CMC. It's not 1, it's not 2, it's 3. But I love how it works. For certain times, I've tried using this when people want to, I mean, my opponent wants to, like, you know, destroy my stuff, and actually get to do it. I get to destroy 2 of their stuff, if Lux is on my side. So I love it. I love the whole random factor of it. It's fun. Okay, I think this is on the staple, removal, Chaos Warp, staple, in casual, and yep, this is really just, you know, I think one of the biggest worry or biggest opponent, biggest fear or biggest downfall of this deck, it's things like Collector Oath, Now Rod, right, that doesn't allow me to use my treasure. So I really need to pack some of this card in specifically to make sure that my deck still move forward, and not like I'm just gonna sit there and cry. Yep, Beast Within, I mean, like, you can't call yourself a EDH green deck without Beast within your deck, right? Yes, Portal of Phyrexia, it's a very new addition from since Brother War as well. I love it. I love Portal of Phyrexia because it's so crazy. The moment you cast it, you will always get a reaction from your opponent on the table, right? And the best part is I don't always cast it for 9 mana, although I can most of the time. I love it when Magda is around and I actually activate it and bring it in and bam, right? Especially, this is especially useful in a situation where people say that, hey, okay, response, I'm going to remove Magda. Then at the very same time, I say, okay, I'll respond, I'll sack another 5 treasure token, I will pull this guy out, boom, and then the next turn, during the upkeep, I will bring Magda back. So I love it. I love how this thing works. And Shutter Skull, I think it's a, yeah, pretty standard card. Blasphemous Act, I love this art. Love it. And Gamble, it's Tutor. So to manage the expectation of this deck, I mean, I didn't want to play a lot of like tutors, and if you can see maximum, it's just this 4 very basic tutors, right? So the other green tutors like Green Sun Zenith, or even like the lights of like Wild Harvest or Shed Summon and things like that, it's not being played in this deck as well. So I really want this deck to be a little bit random, where I can pull things out. I mean, it depends on luck. I mean, besides the fact that yes, I still play Magda. Okay, sue me. Yeah, right? So I guess that's main thing about the deck, and then the rest of them, the rest of the cards are just land to correct. It's very basic, right? Because it's a 2-color deck. I love this. It's a new one. So it's a 2-color decks. Also, yeah, Boseiju. So it's a 2-color deck, I was saying. So it's very simple. It's very unlikely that you will get colored screwed or even mana screwed, considering the fact that I create like treasures very easily in a very early game. So as long as you don't play with a bad hand, as long as you know how to mulligan this deck, most of the time, although I'm just playing 30 land with I don't play excess number of mana rocks, but with the likes of some of the low CMC creatures like the likes of Ragavan or even Dockside itself, that can help to ramp the thing out, or even with like Mana Bird. So 30 land itself, it's pretty decent, right? So with City of Brass, Mana Confluence, yeah, so I just like this deck so much that I just put in all these cards that, you know, makes it pretty. So even like, for example, Cavern of Soul is really one of those cards that is probably, yeah, you can say it's dragon synergy, that you want to protect the dragons and stuff, but it's really not needed on this power level. But I just love it because it's so pretty. Right, Forbidden Orchard and Blast Zone. I love this card. It works as a board wipe as well. I really think that you will see a lot. I mean, yes, it's a reprint, but I don't think I've seen a lot of play, especially in casual. But now this is so affordable. I think most decks should just pick this up and put it into their deck. Right? Okay, Plaza of Heroes, Reliquary Tower, Urza Saga. Yes, a bit overpower, but I love it because, you know, who is complaining if I can, you know, get a mana creep or soul ring after, like, I mean, to keep it consistent. Right, Treasure Vault, one of my favorite land in this deck as well. So at times where I really do not have enough treasures, and I know that I want Magda to go off at end turn, I can really do something with this, with the some of the lands that I have. And yep, last but not least, Gemstone Caverns, another overpower card. But like I said, well, yeah, there's a lot of I'm not, yeah, I don't even know what I'm saying, but yes, so yeah, there are a lot of powerful cards in this deck, but at the same time, I think the mindset of this deck, it's very different in terms of like, hey, is it a 2-card combo win? Is it a 3-card combo win? Do I have excessive number of tutors? Do I have excessive number of counter spell or interaction? I think the number that's packed in this deck, so far that I've played on a high power pot or like a mid-high pot, has always been very enjoyable between my play groups, even different play groups. And I think this is the kind of deck that it's very, you know, you don't know where this is going, because this commander itself is not exactly the most popular commander. Yes, a lot of people have seen this card probably because it's relatively new from last year, but whether or not they know how this thing is going to go, it has this whole element of surprise, which I really enjoy it. And most of the time when they start to figure out what's happening and they try to like make you the arch enemy and try to bring you down together, it's most of the time, if they're playing with this deck for the very first time, it's probably too late when they found out, right? But at the same time, if people know what this deck does, they've played with me before, they will still most of the time leave Jolene alone. It's just like that, because hey, Jolene is giving me treasure and we are all greedy, we want the treasure, right? So I think that is why I like this deck a lot. It creates a lot of you know, a confusion within all these other players. Right, okay, so that's all for this episode. I went on talking non-stop for 30 minutes into the mic about this deck. So like I said, if you like what you see, you can check out the deck and Moxfield. I'll be more than happy if you can give me some feedback on what are some of the cards to take out, what are some of the cards that to put in, or am I playing this deck wrong, for example. But bottom line is, I'm not trying to find ways to fully optimize this deck in one way or another. I'm really wanting it to be a bit of high power, but at the same time really fun pot where everybody have a chance to win the game together and making decision of whether or not to kill Jolene or not, right? So thank you very much for watching. So if you like what you see, please continue to like I said, please continue to subscribe, share it with your friend, do whatever other YouTubers ask you to do, just do the same thing to me. I would appreciate very much. And tell me if there are any commander that you really like to build around this kind of style where you think it's really fun in the pot. Do let me know as well. I'll be more than happy to take a look at your deck list and to see how we can do something similar to this, right? And also at the same time, if you want to see this deck in action, don't forget to check out the link below. There is the Smogsfield link that you can actually check out what this deck is consists of. I mean, if you don't like to listen to me rattle on. And of course, watch this deck in action on Esmond's channel, which I will put the link at the bottom as well. Okay, thank you very much. Whatever time you're watching this, I hope you like this deck. Remember to follow me on Twitter at SmithThankYou at the same time. Thank you very much. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye.